Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the Halftime Talk feature interview series. I'm delighted today to be joined by Mr. Philippos Ioulianou, Director of Energy and Renewables at the Columbia Group. Philippos, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here and share some insights about us and the market.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, Philippos, let's start talking about. I mean, we're going to talk about all things shipping, but in relation to the renewable sort of progress, if you like, on that front, from fuels to ports and infrastructure, and maybe then take a couple of sort of larger view questions as well. I mean, let's start by talking about the alternative fuels picture and progress on that front. I mean, clearly good progress being made. But how far have we come to sort of becoming competitive, if you like, cost-wise with conventional fuels? And how would you rate the adoption of alternative fuels so far in the shipping sector?
Yes, I think we are still at the beginning. We see a lot of great news and which we really envy and we support by trying to introduce, let's say, solutions to utilize those fuels and hopefully to scale them up. And the question is the supply chain, the availability, because ships are moving and the supply chain, especially for those fuels, is not everywhere. So if you don't have really A to B ports, then it's a challenge to really put all your eggs within this alternative fuel. So it will take some time, but we're in a good progress. I mean, we're moving slowly.
As you said, I mean, the ships are moving, of course, aren't they? And the bunkering hubs, there are many of them around the world. Which regions would you say are sort of ahead of others in that sense, from an alternative fuel hub
Yes.
Option point of view?
Yes, I think the big hubs, because for every project we have to make the business case, if it makes sense. Feasibility, viability of the project. So I will name, Singapore, Rotterdam, maybe Dubai is in the good progress. So the big hubs are in progress because government support or the different federations, like in Europe, the European Commission raised a lot of and provided a lot of funding. So I think the big ports, they could say that they are almost ready to support. But, this is a peak of the iceberg. The vessels are not calling just there, as I said before.
And I mean, would you say that in terms of government even commitment and of course the investment in that national infrastructure of various ports, do you think that in the last year or two we've had a step back or a step forward? There's been a lot of criticism of, the energy transition in general has taken a bit of a back seat with the energy security coming more to the fore. Do you feel Europe has been ahead of the game on the ET front, but what obstacles do you think exist there, if anything, in terms of that momentum?
The obstacle is it should be a global, let's say, motion, a global way forward, not just Europe to do this, because by doing this, certainly ship owners or charters will avoid Europe or we will see transshipments. So, and it's good that we see IMO is discussing and hopefully by end of this year, early next year, we'll have some news with the new Net Zero Act that we're gonna have like a global scheme because this energy transition, decarbonization is a problem for all, that all we have to
Yes.
sit together, not just something that Europe have to show. But Europe is a good example, having EU ETS and now fuel EU and some other future schemes that possibly will come, maybe to prove the concept that things are possible, but the regulators, they have to step up. And now the good thing is like we monetize the emissions. Before was let's try to lower our emission, let's try to make our vessel more efficient. But now if we monetize and we see a bill with it, then I think actions will come.
Okay, and I mean, in terms of, you mentioned the Fuel EU Maritime Initiative, there's the ETS, EU ETS, and other regions have their own emissions trading schemes. I mean, they've set long-term targets, long-term meaning up to 2050 starting, the Fuel EU Maritime one started just this year. So it's a 25-year plan, increasing that target as the years go on. what are the obstacles to those targets, do you think? I mean, you've mentioned agreement that we all need to be moving together, but let's get real. That's not always going to happen. So from, again, affordability point of view, do you see that EU government budgets are going to be able to continue with that commitment?
The thing is about the capex. I will start with the capex. Is a big investment in order if we wish to decarbonize firstly our existing assets, because the important is to be circular and sustainable. We need to utilize to the maximum the existing assets we have, try to reduce emissions and make them more green and efficient, and then build up the vessels. I mean, in parallel, the progress to have ready the solutions, the engines to burn those fuels, and then to have the
Yeah.
fuels available. My wish is, especially in the European Union, having the EU ETS and the states like UK that enforce these emission trading schemes, the money that they collect from those actually to be given back to the industry to decarbonize or create the infrastructure for decarbonization. Because otherwise, we are not really solving the answer. And if we see other industries, how they decarbonize energy, I mean, renewable solar, all of this, most of the states, I don't want to say all, they used to subsidize. They subsidize this
Yeah.
transition at the beginning until the technology it's affordable. I mean, the cost of a solar per kilowatt went tremendously down the last 10 years. So the states, they have to support in a way this decarbonization. We should not ask always the ship owners to pay the biggest bill.
Yeah, of course. I mean that you do need those subsidies, don't you, as an incentive. I mean, otherwise the ship owners won't pay those bills, whether it's to retrofit their ships or for ship owning companies to buy whole new ships. And then you have the added complexity at the moment when you look at the geopolitical front of where are those ships being built. You know, China is a big shipbuilding center, and is it going to get the supply chain materials that it needs? So the sector is facing some challenges. Which of the green fuels do you think will make the most progress soon? You've got the methanol, you've got the ammonia, hydrogen is being really touted, isn't it, as a sort of long-term, the green hydrogen journey, biofuels. Where do you think which hold advantages over others, if anything?
Yes, I mean, it will be a fuel mix. It will not be one fuel. This is clear. Like we had so far, we had the HFO, then we had the gas, VLSFO, and now we see the technology is not just to have the fuel available, but we need to have the engines available to burn those fuels. So a few years ago was methanol. Now we heard about a lot of orders for ammonia. So it will be based, as I mentioned before, on the business case, where the volume it is and commitment, firm commitments we need and support from states to have the regulations to build up all the safety aspects and the supply. Like ammonia, they say is very hazardous. But this is a question
Yes.
that we have to answer. So it's a lot of if, but what I will say, it will not happen the next 2, 3 years. But what I see now with the fuel EU, we'll see a lot of biofuel, which is not a green fuel, but it's on the way towards these alternative fuels. And we see a lot of off-takers. They start now acquiring biofuels and making strategy with this. This will help them to utilize the existing fleets. But then I see methanol will come, and of course ammonia will come in the near future, not in the next 2 years.
Okay, and but biofuel, from what I've heard, is popular, and in fact, the supply is not keeping up with the demand, is it, at the moment, as that interim bridge? What's the reason behind that?
Because it was not clear. I mean, the proof of sustainability, there are a lot of behind. I mean, everybody can produce biofuel. It's not difficult, but how you produce the ingredients you produce the biofuel, and then you need to have it, let's say, proof. So they need to have, in order to be used and exempted from, let's say, certain penalties, to have this POS, proof of sustainability. So without
Mm,
having this, you may plan to buy from a supplier, but then it's not, let's say, a proof that can offset penalties. But biofuel, I think it will be the interim solution for the next year for customers or ship owners that would like to offset. They will try to use biofuels because also it's a matter for companies that are public listed. Those companies, they are looking for ship owners and charterers to use, let's say, alternative solutions that are available in the market. So the only one that is available
yeah.
in bigger scale compared to methanol or ammonia, it's biofuel at this stage.
And I mean, what about Philippos, about sort of, I mean, connected to that, also, you're talking about companies finding alternatives. Also, as companies make these choices, they have to, why are they doing it? Maybe there's an economic argument, but also, they're being measured, they're being judged, as you said, from a policy regulation point of view, from a finance point of view, of course. The banking sector, is sometimes a bit strict about what it's going to fund. But we have so many different mechanisms in measuring methodologies out there, don't we? And that's one sticking point, isn't it? How the IMO collects its data and measures is different from, various countries' ETS systems. So can we find, do you think, a common ground on measurement, accountability, alignment on that front? Is it required?
I think it's required because by adding all these costs, we add a layer of cost, which at these layers of cost, then users, us, the people will need to pay those bills. So we create a lot of costs, maybe necessary, maybe not necessary, but if we understand it for a common good, then I think all of us will accept that we will have to pay something if we go to decarbonize. It's not just the ship owner, but also us as users, as consumers, that we are asking for certain goods, that we have to pay also something on top. And yes, the right thing should be, I mean, one unified system. Hopefully, this with the IMO will be the best system. So we don't need to have one for the Far East, one for East, one for Africa, one for Europe. It should be one. And also all this data that we collect to be, I mean, into one system, unify in order to avoid all these extra cost complexities. Also, cybersecurity, having all this data somewhere, there is also certain risks that we should avoid, and we should try to not make our life complex, but make it more simpler and more easily to understand.
Yeah, and I mean, and we certainly have the technology to do all of that, don't we? So, that there shouldn't be any reason for that. I mean, the other thing that we've seen change, apart from technology advancements and systems like AI, which should help to do all of these sort of adapting data and sort of putting everyone on an equal front, excuse me, on that stage is the other big dynamic we've seen in the shipping sector, of course, which is always a very dynamic place, isn't it? But the last 2, 3 years, rerouting of oil routes, of trade routes because of Russia, Ukraine, because of the Middle East, Strait of Hormuz, Suez Canal, disruptions to an extent. And of course, that's come at a cost, a lot of rerouting of shipping traffic. How do you think that is going to impact the appetite for alternative fuels as we go forward? Let's assume those routes remain permanent, they're longer routes, they're more expensive routes, using more fuel. Has that sort of rocked the boat at all?
Of course, you have to be real. You cannot make a long-term strategy because those things happen in the short term. So you need to be really agile. Your strategy, I mean, commercial and environmental, should be somehow interrelated. And somehow you need to, these macroeconomics you have mentioned really have an impact. Imagine if you build a vessel and you fix a contract to buy methanol from Shanghai and then to bunker in
Of
methanol
course.
in bunker in Rotterdam. And then you have to go via South Africa. So what will happen? Because you cannot cross. Of course, additional costs that you didn't consider, then you need to pass this cost to someone else. So there is a lot of disturbance that is coming within your operation, and you have to be really flexible. And planning should be now with all these changes, I mean, more onto short term. And this, of course, all these macro factors, of course, have an impact within policies and focus of the decision makers. Because before it was environment, now we are shifting more into security, more to defense, more to resilience. So there are other parameters that decision makers they have to focus somewhere. They cannot focus everywhere. They were
Yeah.
lost. Yeah. So somehow this, as you have mentioned before, it's a bit slowed down maybe, but it's still there. And we have to insist, like, even if something else happen, we should not forget the environment because the clock is ticking. 2050 is very close. So even if we have other aspects, we should not put fourth, fifth priority in our environment. It should stay on top. And the industry and the stakeholder, they have to support each other to make it happen.
Absolutely. I mentioned earlier some geopolitical sort of factor, which is really a trade factor, the question about shipbuilding. Because
Mhm.
even though this is a temporary thing, perhaps, and the US-China trade back and forth negotiations will end up reaching some conclusions, but as I mentioned, the majority of sh new ships being built are in China. And there's already been a backlog and problem with getting those orders to continue because of parts, etc., and even companies sort of wanting to be, foreign companies who are building their ships there, don't want to be held hostage without being able to remove those. Has that impacted things in the last few months? The mentality around investment into new vessels, or does the sector see this as a temporary barrier?
We hope it's a temporary. I think there are discussions and the solution will come. So yes, of course, now maybe it was the last time, the last years were like the new build orders were booming. Now all this uncertainty, of course, you have to think two, three times until decisions are taken. Actions will happen afterwards. So this is just a matter of maybe to reflect. I mean, and we see it's not just the macro, it's also the environmental, the availability of fuel. So we have to maybe think two, three times before you take a decision. But I don't think this will be a major problem, hopefully.
And do you think, Mr. Philippos, within Europe, in terms of the different member states, for example, the Fit for 55 target, that is obviously it's sort of a new policy making, isn't it? It's trying to bring in new
Yeah.
legislation, updating legislation for Europe's goals, environmental sustainability goals. Is there broad agreement amongst member states within Europe? Forget about agreeing with the rest of the world, but given, obviously a lot of political changes within the continent in terms of, where those swings are happening, do we see a risk to the member states agreeing amongst each other, even as far as EU policy goes?
I think, yes, you said it right. I mean, all this macro that happen and different governments and different challenges. I think some countries are moving fast. Some and they have a firm commitment with a strategy to 2050. Some others are still discussing. We see recently we had in Spain this blackout. I mean,
Yes.
because of all this renewable. On the one aspect, we said we want to go full renewable, but we need to evaluate all the risk to run risk assessment because the economy was fully depend on HFO, fully depend on a certain model. So now having all these renewables, etc., is nice, but we have not to, let's say, impact our lives a lot. And member states can learn from each other because certain states, they have really clear focus and expertise and know-how, but we should not reinvent the wheel everywhere. It's different countries, bigger, smaller, more commitment to the environment or not more commitment, but we should learn to each other. And each country should share experience or people to help the other to scale up. So at the end of the day, we have a union that have, let's say, one, strategy together because Fit for 55 is for the whole Europe, not just for the Netherlands, Denmark, or Sweden. It's also for South Europe.
Of course. Has there been any clarity since those blackouts, Spain, Portugal, France, as to what that was? I mean, yes, especially Spain and Portugal are ahead of the game with renewables. They're making big
Mhm.
commitments. Why did those, has there been some conclusion as to why those blackouts happened when they did?
Yes, we hear a lot of comments. We hear comments, but I mean, it's a matter of the distribution and handling all these, let's say, inflows of energies and how you should operate and keep the load of the grid at a level
Yes.
that can handle the demand. So to meet the supply with demand. So it's a new journey for all of us having all these different sources. So I hope we will have a lesson learn, find the root cause from the Iberian lesson now, and the rest, I mean, they will try to avoid and hedge and mitigate those risks because if it happens there, definitely will happen in other countries. So we have to help each other.
And what would be the priority to get the grid infrastructure investment accelerated? Because that is obviously, as you said, it's the grid load, it's how much it can take, it's protecting it obviously from breakdowns as what happened. What do you think is the missing key there? Is it just a matter of time that we need, or could more be being done?
I mean, it's we have to, of course, integrate renewables. We have to upgrade the grid. We have also to understand more the users because the last few years, the markets are not anymore from one unit selling to the whole state. It's open market, the energy market. We see also from countries to countries. So somehow the whole Europe, they need somehow to monitor the production in certain areas. Now we
Mhm.
have all these digital elements that we can monitor and let's say pass energy from one state to the other one have, let's say, now with this hopefully shipping, we're going to have the shore connection, so it will be a lot of demand from the ports. So try to understand what is coming in from the risk perspective, how this will affect the grid operation, and try to see, do we need more renewables or not? Or how we generate energy accordingly, how users are behaving at certain times. So the data are there. We have digital smart meters. So it's a matter of learning and try to see how we could match fast the supply with demand and have, of course, available storage. So in order to avoid these blackouts, have the storage to offset this possible loss of the grid.
And that storage story, of course, the battery storage, the grid, that has always been catch up, hasn't it? It's playing catch up with demand. Again, on that front, from a technology point of view, are we seeing fast enough solutions being offered to do that?
I mean, solutions are available. Technology, as I mentioned at the beginning about the solar, technology of batteries, especially big batteries, is in progress now.
Yes.
So hopefully we're going to have bigger capacity in smaller scale. And then it's a matter of cost. Those materials are very rare. So where you find them, how you source them, who is going to be the supplier, how dependent we're going to be on those suppliers, because these things controlled from companies, and these companies can really control your energy of the state, how you handle it. So I think we are on a good track, and I think batteries is like the renewables before 10, 15 years. New technology with the time will get cheaper and more affordable, but we need it. I mean, it's a matter that
Yeah.
we have to introduce into our grids the storage.
Mr. Philippos Ioulianou, Director of Energy and Renewables at the Columbia Group. Thanks so much for joining us on Halftime Talk today with your insights. It's been great to have you.
Same here, and I hope to see you again soon